So a couple of months ago, I went to this information session for this community college system that was supposedly going tuition free. And so this was about how you can get tuition waived. And I wanted to go because I was curious, maybe I can learn some new skills at some classes there. Maybe this is a way to connect with people. And the first thing that they said was, in order to get tuition waived, you have to be enrolled in a formal degree program, like an associate's degree or something like that. And they said it can't be just for fun, meaning if you go there just to take classes because you want to learn and develop your mind and improve your life and perhaps be of greater use to the people around you, that is just for fun. And I think that this really speaks volumes about how we think about and structure education in our society. It is not about learning or about education in the true sense of the word. It is really about credentialing and hoop jumping. Taking specific classes because you want to build new skills or develop your life or be of more use to the people around you is seen as just for fun. Whereas being enrolled in a formal degree program so that you can get a piece of paper, that is what is taken seriously. That's what is seen as real education. It's a way of looking at education that takes most of the purpose, learning, and value out of it. And I've always been inclined to think about this in almost the opposite way, where it seems to me like learning is obviously what really matters, and developing yourself in various ways, and kind of the credentialing and the hoop jumping, that is actually what I struggle to take seriously. Of course, there's nuance to this. And I say that having lived a life where I was ultra focused on credentialing and you could say hoop jumping for many years, and also having lived a life, like increasingly now, where I'm much more interested in learning and growing. And so now it's kind of clear to me, like, no wonder people struggle with motivation when it comes to school. No wonder they have to just keep pushing themselves, because you're forced to fight against common sense and logic and really our own humanity. And the other thing is, most of us are getting shaped in deep and profound ways by this system and this culture that views education and learning this way. And that imposes immense limitations on us that we carry with us for life until we ultimately start to actually look at it and do something about it. Now, bringing this discussion more to the issue of conventional schooling, one of the key aspects of school in our society is that it doesn't allow your learning to be driven by your inner compass or your intuition or your inner guidance system or whatever you want to call that. Instead, everything you do in that system pretty much, or for the most part, has to be driven by what that system says. And this is very challenging because very often we have, especially, as kids, right, we have this very strong part of us that is screaming to us saying that this is wrong. And it is wrong, right? Why should bureaucrats and social planners dictate your education? That's wrong. And so we have to disconnect from that inner compass in order to move through that system. And disconnecting from our inner compass, which is really like disconnecting from our true selves, causes immense pain and a lot of psychological distress. And I think very often what happens is that kind of acute psychological stress from that disconnection that is a result of being in that system often gets labeled as mental illness in the kid. Sometimes it could be called things like ADHD or oppositional defiant disorder or anxiety or whatever it may be. But it's like we basically pathologize that rather than seeing what's really going on, which is the kid is being forced into this kind of a system that doesn't really nurture or respect who they really are, and it doesn't allow their education to be oriented around that, which of course would be the sane and healthy thing. Instead, we force the kid to disconnect from that. And so all of the different experts and, educational consultants and mental health professionals, especially mental health professionals, working in and around that system, they think that the kid is healthy once they're fully, disconnected from their authentic selves, right? So once they have kind of broken down their authentic self and they are sort of conforming, however marginally, to that system, these mental health professionals think that it's a job well done. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the mental health professionals themselves, they haven't developed their own inner compass or, their own true self, right? They're not orienting their lives around that. And so they can't see or nurture that in the kid. They think that the kid is healthy once the kid has been kind of diminished to their own level of disconnection. And so I think in order to reconnect with that, right, in order to reconnect with our inner compass or inner guidance system or our true self, or however you want to look at that, we really have to work through all of that pain. However, I think at the end of the day, it's just about starting with where we're at today, right? Starting with, being present with what's coming up for us today, not getting ahead of ourselves, starting with the pain that's coming up for us in the moment, but also listening to our intuition today about what, is the right thing for us to do next. And so truly educating ourselves is something that happens through that connection to our inner compass, right? That is what is guiding that. And this, by the way, is the big divide between the conventional school system, which is dominant in our society, and more alternative, but highly respected forms of alternative education, like Montessori, like forms of progressive education, like unschooling, free schools, etc. Is that these kind of alternative forms of education actually recognize that the school system is sort of breaking down your true self and forcing you to be some kind of a cog in a machine or a robot or something like that. And instead, they try to nurture the actual self of the child. And when you start to reconnect with your inner compass or your intuition, something really interesting happens, which is you start to develop a lot more power and a lot more agency. And then when that happens, you start to realize that you have far less of a need for a teacher or an educational authority to basically control or have a very heavy hand in your learning. You start to realize that this is something that largely you can control. Now, of course, you may feel that you want a teacher to help you or something like that, but they will likely have a much more kind of subordinated role in your learning. And at first, this is quite hard to see because we get heavily indoctrinated through the school system to believe that we need an authority to have this very, very heavy hand in our learning, that we need them to basically control and dictate how it works. And I think it's not unlike something that happens for many kids, which is the same thing when it comes to our own emotional and psychological growth and healing, which is that we get basically indoctrinated to believe that we need a mental health professional to basically control that for us. And of course, that's not to say that an actual mental health professional or clinical help can't be helpful for some people some of the time. And I'm certainly not trying to discourage anybody from seeking those services. But for many of us, at least, we really benefit a lot from kind of taking charge of that and really taking ownership over that, whether it's our learning or our emotional healing journey or whatever it may be. Now, because of all of this, it took me a long time to realize that a perfectly legitimate approach to educating oneself is to pick a topic or a number of topics that you're interested in, find a number of books or articles about them, read them, watch videos on these topics, find people to talk to or connect with over these topics, maybe find activities in the world you can participate in that involve learning about these topics, practicing what you've learned, and do all of that at your own pace, in your own way, perhaps finding your own structure with all of that. And this may sound obvious, but I think you might be surprised at the degree to which we might be basically indoctrinated into kind of subordinating this, into not taking it seriously. Like, oh yeah, that's fine to do in your free time or just for fun, but it's not actually something to be taken as seriously as other forms of learning. But I think there are a bunch of reasons why this more kind of self-directed approach to educating oneself that I've described is superior, or at least superior a lot of the time, which is when we are directing our own learning, you could say that that is actually when real learning happens. It also fuels motivation to learn more and more. Whereas with regular schooling, you basically have to kind of keep drawing on your willpower, which eventually causes burnout and potentially even pretty serious mental problems. We also don't have an authority that's kind of hovering over us, that is basically screwing with us emotionally, right? They're not, using fear, or they're not constantly judging and evaluating us. And they're also not giving us these little doggy biscuits like grades or gold stars or praise or whatever. All of that undermines learning, motivation, purpose. It also builds self-awareness, in stark contrast to school, which, if we're actually being honest with each other, reduces self-awareness. It often massively increases insecurity, and then people often orient their lives around that insecurity. Now, I just want to be clear, this isn't to say that a more conventional approach to education is completely useless or has no place, because at the end of the day, there's still a certain reality to the world that we live in, which is that if you want to go down certain career paths, or you want to get taken seriously in various corners of society, you do have to pursue certain paths. Like, for example, if you want to be a nurse, right? There's a very specific career educational path you have to go down. But I think that that type of more formal educational path is not nearly as necessary as people make it out to be. And B, there is all the difference in the world between choosing to pursue some of that from a place of you are ultimately directing your own education in the grand scheme of your life, and then you're kind of choosing to enter into those things in whatever way you decide, versus you've been kind of broken down and diminished and like heavily programmed by the educational system and our educational culture surrounding it, and then you just kind of have no choice but to move in that kind of direction because that's all that you know. So those things are very different. So these are some of my thoughts on how we can truly educate ourselves after coming out of the school system. And I really like this topic because it is a way in which we can just bring so much more joy and passion and purpose into our life. And it's not just fun for the sake of it. It's fun because it really helps us to grow and kind of, become of more value to the world around us. So I really hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Please also share this video with anybody who you think might like it. Thank you for watching this, and I look forward to having you next time.